In this section, we'll address several key issues that are essential in building a great team. Specifically, defining what makes a great team, differentiating amongst the various players on a team, and providing appropriate coaching to ensure that each member reaches his or her maximum potential, conducting effective performance evaluations. So, what defines a great team? It's actually fairly simple. It's the team with the best players. And in business, as in sports, the team with the best players usually wins. That's why, as an effective leader, you need to invest the majority of your time and energy in building that winning team. Specifically, you need to focus on evaluation, making sure your feedback is candid, coaching, guiding, critiquing, and helping your people to improve their performance in every way, building self-confidence, pouring out encouragement, caring, and recognition. In this section, we'll look more in depth at each of these activities. Let's start with the practice of differentiation.
Differentiation is the practice of treating people differently based on their performance and how they live the values of the company. Companies win when their managers can make a clear and meaningful distinction between top and bottom performing businesses and make the appropriate decisions about allocating resources to those businesses with the greatest potential. The practice should be no different when it comes to people, because after all, a company is its people. It's not the factory or a certain patent that it may hold, or even its current market share. And just like leaders are required to make appropriate and thoughtful decisions about their business, they must also make these decisions about their people. When all is said and done, differentiation is really resource allocation. And winning managers are those who invest where their payback is highest. The better the people, the better the team, the better the business. So, where do we start? In most organizations of any size, an individual's performance falls into one of three pretty consistent categories. The first step in being a leader who effectively practices differentiation is understanding the characteristics of each group. There are the top performers, the players who consistently bring their A game every day. They are the ones who are living the values of the organization, meeting and usually exceeding the expectations put on them, and they are role models for those around them. There are the middle performers. These are solid contributors and are, in most ways, the backbone of the company. Then there is the bottom group. These people are struggling. They may be consistently missing performance targets, and even worse, they may not be living the mission and values. The interesting thing is that in most organizations, the distribution of performance is pretty consistent. About 20% of your team can be identified as high performers, 70% are middle performers, and 10% fall into the lowest performing category. Jack refers to this as the 20-70-10 principle. There are lots of different reasons why people fall into each of these categories, but there are two important facts to keep in mind. First, that a person who falls into the bottom 10% is not necessarily a bad person or lazy or stupid. Second, that movement among the categories is common and natural. A person who may have been a top performer last year may be off her game this year, or someone previously struggling could, with a new role or some coaching, suddenly bolt up to become a 20%er. Nevertheless, differentiation requires you to assess your employees and separate them into three categories: the top 20%, the middle 70%, and the bottom 10%. And each group is managed differently. By rewarding the superstars in a very public way that is both soul-satisfying and financially satisfying. By constantly developing the middle 70 with training and support. By coaching the bottom-tier performers out so better talent can be brought in. But before we go too deeply into the management decisions to be made, let's first spend a little time reviewing the data that can help us decide which players fit into which categories. When you are evaluating your people, you are going to use both hard and soft measures. Hard measures are the performance goals that are usually captured in terms of how many, how much, and when. Soft measures refer to the attitudes and behaviors team members use to attain the results. When evaluating performance, be as quantitative as possible. The best feedback allows you to be fair and objective and to compare people to one another and to their specific, measurable performance expectations. Of course, this requires that you clearly identify those performance expectations and measure them fairly and on a regular basis. Evaluating behaviors or values is a little harder to boil down to a number on a scale. Behaviors are, by their nature, more qualitative and require more judgment. This is precisely the reason that we spent so much time in the previous section focusing on the need to make the mission and values of the organization as specific and well-defined as possible. One method to help visualize how team members are performing relative to both hard and soft metrics is to use a quadrant scale. Not only can this be a valuable tool for the manager, but it is an excellent visual aid that should be part of any evaluation discussion. Here's how it works. Type 1. These people have high performance and they are doing it the right way. They are your stars and role models. You have to keep encouraging them to do more of what they are doing and let them know how much you appreciate their performance, both with words and, if possible, in their wallets. Type 2. These are low performers who also display bad behaviors. If you have been appraising them 3 to 4 times during the year and they haven't shown improvement, don't waste any more time. You should coach them out of your organization as soon as possible. Type 3. These people are low performers with good values, who are well-intentioned and hopefully just have short-term issues. They are doing things the right way, but they are missing their numbers. These people deserve a second chance, even a third chance. Perhaps the problems are being driven by something personal at home or some other issues that you know nothing about. Talk with them, coach them, and support them. They are the kind of people you want to keep on the team if you can get their performance turned around. Type 4. These people are high performers who are getting results, but are doing so with behaviors that don't fit the culture that you have established. These are the hardest people to deal with in the organization, and few leaders will face up to this situation. They like the short-term numbers too much, but you can lose total credibility as a leader if you ignore values violations just to hit your numbers. Call out these people with candid eyeball-to-eyeball evaluations immediately when you see the violation. If they don't improve, don't hesitate to coach them out of your organization.
As a leader and as an effective manager, you must be completely candid with yourself about who are the A, B, and C players on your team. While it's generally easier to focus on your A players, you must never forget that the middle 70%, your B players, are tremendously important to the organization and are too often ignored. They need training, positive feedback, and thoughtful goal setting. If individuals in this group have particular promise, they should be given opportunities to find their strengths and to grow. One possible approach to this, if your organization is large enough, is to provide them with opportunities to rotate amongst businesses and functions to increase their experience and knowledge and to test their leadership skills. Some may develop into A- or even A-level players, But everyone in this large group needs to be made to feel as if he truly belongs. You don't want to risk losing your B players. You want to keep and, if possible, improve them. Listen to Jack's advice about coaching the middle 70%.
Central to your principle of operating and managing people through 20-70-10 differentiation, there's that middle 70, that critical, largest group of people in the company or in any organization is that middle 70. How do you keep them motivated, Jack? They're not in the top 20. They're not a problem in the bottom 10. How do you keep their energy up and their commitment going?
First of all, it's the most important thing you do in many ways, because you've got to have these people on board, bought into the situation. So they've got to know a couple of things. One, their position in the organization when you go 20-70-10 is done annually. This isn't a lifetime appointment or segregation. This is what it looked like last year. So there's a chance to get in the top 20. And you've got to always show them how they can improve. You've got to also always show them runway, how they can move up in the organization, how their careers can expand. Keep them excited. Send them to courses. Don't treat them as anything other than people on the move. Don't treat them as people locked into a position.
The middle 70, in your opinion, are really the heart and soul of the company. They're critical to the company's success. You can't forget them as you pay attention to the top 20 and the bottom 10.
Well, unfortunately, people spend too much time on the bottom 10. And you've got to be energizing that middle group, that group that you so desperately need to carry out the direction that the leadership wants.
So, what about the bottom 10%? What about your C players? When a person has been a mediocre performer for a sustained period of time, his manager must start a humane but unambiguous conversation about moving on. Even if they're nice people, and without doubt many are, their talents aren't suited to achieving your mission. There's no sugarcoating this. They have to go. And remember, your C players can include both Type 2 and Type 4 team members. Of course, asking underperformers to leave is more easily said than done. But if your organization has clear performance expectations and a candid evaluation process, C players will know who they are. When you're straight with them about how they're doing and where they stand, they often leave before you ask them to, and in many cases, end up having successful careers in other organizations where they can excel. Listen to Jack's advice about managing the bottom 10%.
Jack, I've probably seen you speak hundreds of times, and if there is one topic that incites people to riot, it's about the bottom 10, the underperformers, that small group of people who are not they're not hitting their numbers and they have the wrong values. This bottom 10 makes people very defensive and riled up. So let's talk about the management of the bottom 10 in differentiation. Is the bottom 10, does that only happen, is that something you should only think about in a big company? I say I run an organization with 5 people or 10 people. Do I have a bottom 10%?
Absolutely. Now the question is, what do you want to do with it? You may have 10 people and letting go of one would be indispensable to you. Question you got to ask yourself is, would you be better off taking that person out and putting a new person in and finding somebody else that isn't as good and raising the bar? I think in an organization or a sports team, you want to be constantly raising the bar. Somehow, the world accepts a sports team doing it. Somebody has a bad batting average, somebody can't catch passes, accept the world taking them out. School, high school, college, people accept getting grades. Why, when you become 23 or 24 and you go to work, should that stop happening? Why is it wrong to look at people and say, you're not doing it? You flunked. You're not cutting it. You've got to move on. Now, that doesn't mean...
It's mean. That's what people say. It sounds mean.
Is it mean in college?
I don't think it's mean.
Is it mean in college? Is it mean on a baseball team? No, we accept it. It's cruel if someone handles it in a way that surprises somebody. That you walk in one day and the boss says to you, you're out. Clean your desk, be gone. and you had no idea was coming. That's bad management. That's not differentiation that caused that problem. No one should ever be surprised finding out where they stand. Baseball players see it in the paper every day. They see where they stand. If you're doing the appraisal system right, your employees will know all the time what they're doing, what they should be doing, and if they're missing, they'll know it. And then when you take them out, you don't take them out in a day or a week or a month. You give them a little time to get adjusted and move on somewhere else where they might flourish. And you got to treat them well on the way out. They're your mistake. You brought them in. You own them. But you got to get them out of the organization if you want to upgrade the organization and become truly competitive.
I think what people don't understand is that when you say to somebody in the bottom 10, you're in the bottom 10, it's not like you're a failure at life. You're in the wrong job for you. You're in the wrong organization. And it's not about saying, get out, you're a failure. It's about saying you need to go find work that is more rewarding. We have more stories from people who were let go as part of a bottom 10%, a program, who said, thank God it happened. I moved on to being in the work that I truly loved and that I was good at. And so if you're candid along the way, that bottom 10 message is one that is delivered humanely and candidly and moves you to a better place.
In a good management system, in a candid appraisal system that is rigorous, this is not an issue because people always know where they stand and they can move on themselves. It's self-policing as they see their appraisals getting in trouble all the time. They'll get out and they'll thank you for it eventually. So let me just tell you that the idea that this is cruel, the cruelest thing is keeping bad performers, and then a recession hits, and they're 45 years old or 50 years old, and some jerk manager comes down and says, sorry, you got to leave. Why me? Because you're in the bottom 10, but you never told me. I've been here 30 years. That's cruelty. Cruelty is an appraisal system that doesn't tell people where they stand. And none of you in this class should ever manage anybody and have them say, I didn't know where I stood. And those of you that are in companies, each one of you should go back and find out where you stand. That's so important.
What if you're a boss and you think you have the perfect team and you say, I remember we were in a store one time and a manager came up to you and said, I've got the perfect team. I don't have anybody I want to let go. I don't have a bottom 10%. We've heard that question so many times. Jack, is there always a bottom 10%? Does the bottom 10% always have to go? What if you've worked long and hard and you've got a great team?
You'll build a terrific team. If you're happy with it and you're willing to ride with it, you don't have to do this. The facts are, though, you got to identify who your weakest player is, and then make the decision to keep them or not keep them. But don't hide behind they're all good. That's a weak manager. They're not all the same. They weren't all the same in college, high school, or wherever they were. They weren't all the same. So don't hide behind that silly argument. Face into the fact you've got a weak person. If you don't want to deal with it, if you're willing to ride with that person, okay. But in a good system, you'll coach them out and get them replaced with somebody better.
Being an effective leader requires sensitivity and awareness of past corporate culture. You can't just suddenly move to a model that practices and rewards differentiation overnight. You have to begin employing differentiation slowly. And the first step of this process begins with implementing regular performance reviews. So let's take a little time to talk about the qualities of an effective evaluation system. Every company, of course, will have its own practices and processes for feedback, but the most effective managers will give timely performance reviews. Jack recommends that you sit down with each employee quarterly to let them know where they stand. Be candid. Every employee should know where they fit on the distribution curve and what they have to do, change, improve, or do more of to move up. Keep the evaluations simple. They should include both quantitative or performance measures and qualitative or behavior measures. but they don't have to be overly complex. You can have a very effective evaluation simply by drawing a line down the center of a piece of paper and explaining to employees what they are doing well and what they need to work on.
To summarize, evaluations that are simple, candid, and frequent will support differentiation, keep the lines of communication open, and keep your team focused on the mission and values of your organization. They'll build your team's trust and confidence they have in themselves and in you. If you keep doing this, you'll be well on your way to building a winning team.